Before we start, I want to say two things. First, this is the first video I'm doing with a teleprompter, so if you notice the remote in my hands, or perhaps see takes go longer than usual, that's the reason. Second, I have a bit of an unusual question for you, but there is a good reason to ask it. Cast your mind 20 years ago. What were the highest earning films in 2004, and what won for Best Picture at the Oscars? I'll reveal the answer later. Around the live and HD performance of X, The Life and Times of Malcolm X, the Metropolitan Opera uploaded a video to their YouTube channel. It was of Maestro Yannick Nézet-Séguin asking for donations, with new and increased donations being matched through the end of the year. While I was weirdly hopeful this would have been to get John Adams' El Nino onto the live and HD schedule, Occam's razor would dictate that this was just a yearly thing they do. You could probably go onto their YouTube channel archives and find similar videos. But it wasn't the video that drew my attention, but a comment left on the video. From an @Wotan10950, it said this, quote, "More great classics, not works of our time. In an effort to downsize, I recently disposed of my opera news magazines from the 70s onward. Edition after edition showcased the latest operas by current composers. Except for one or two, the operas are all forgotten today." End quote. First of all, congrats on downsizing. I know a few people, myself included, who could stand to do a bit of that. More importantly, you must be a real hoot at parties, going around telling people how great music was back in the day, like in 1853. Yes, 1853. The year that two absolutely exquisite classics were written. Famke the Fool and Le Nabob.
What?
And you thought the slush pile only existed now. Nabob has had no known revival, while Famke was only ever performed once. Hell, you can't even find the score for Famke anymore. Probably not for Nabob either. If you're wondering what a slush pile is, it's a literary term for unsolicited work sent to a publisher. Just about everything in the pile will be rejected, not just because of quality, but because the publisher doesn't have the time to turn everything into a profitable work. They're essentially looking for the one or two gems as the slush melts away. Might be odd to bring up amateur hopefuls in literature when talking about a medium that still in many ways uses the patron system, but it speaks to how things are different from 170 years ago. Technology has made it easier to write and play back your music. There are more people in the world that have the ability to create. Opera is no longer confined to merely a few countries, but has a worldwide reach that sings in any language. The ingredients are there for anyone on the planet to write a great opera. Well, not anyone, or anything for that matter. Hell, just for fun, I asked ChatGTP to write a libretto for a romantic opera, and this is what it spat out. Yep, obviously not a Pulitzer entry. But in a more nuanced way, anyone can create a great opera. To borrow a quote from the character Anton Ego from Disney's Ratatouille, not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere, end quote. Hence, the slush pile. Not everything is going to be a hit like Il Trovatore and La Traviata, the actual classics from 1853. Most of the time, art will fly right by us as we only catch a glimpse of it, only to think years later, remember that one opera that had the strange rapping section?
I'ma tell you about my brother, tell you about my mother. I'ma tell you about blackness and all the lies that go with it.
And sometimes the hit just doesn't come right away. Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring was poorly received at its premiere, though more to do with Nijinsky's choreography than the music. The Proclaimers' I'm Gonna Be 500 Miles released in 1988, but only became a hit in 1993 as part of the movie Benny and June. Over in gaming, the video game Among Us released in 2018 as a quirky multiplayer game, but didn't become a major hit until 2020. I suppose I could also add the Rocky Horror Picture Show to the list as well. The film bombed upon release, but created a cult following through midnight screenings, becoming one of the most successful films in history. But That's the point. You don't know what's going to be a hit, or when it will be a hit, or who will be a hit with, or if it's still a copyrighted work, if you have the money to perform the hit. Don't underestimate copyright here. If a company is looking to cut costs, using something that lost copyright is more preferred. Why else do you think Samsung used Tosca in their new commercial? It's not because people understand that Tosca is singing about her pain despite dedicating her life to music and faith. It's just really cheap to license. People using Steamboat Willie, probably the same, but it's more for laughs right now. Which brings me back to commenter Wotan's statement about how only 1 or 2 new operas listed in those magazines are still around. Well, more than likely an exaggeration, it definitely makes sense. Especially nowadays when so much content is created that you probably don't remember that Everything Everywhere All at Once practically swept the Oscars last year.
Mom, I just want an Oscar!
Or why you didn't know another highly acclaimed movie called The First Slam Dunk opened in America at the same time we all did the Barbenheimer double bill. It all gets lost in the slush, right next to Famke the Fool and Linda Bob. But even when that happens, I will still fight for new art. Sure, we may find ourselves in years like 2011 and 2012, where I suppose you could say the only notable opera from those 2 years was the equivalent of a jukebox musical. But then you have 2016 and 17, where you see just an explosion of potential greatness. Hey, quick side note. The first opera I use here, Daniel Snyder's Charlie Parker's Yardbird, isn't exactly a 2016 opera. I misread it when I was scripting things out. Didn't realize it until late into the editing process. The point I'm making still works. It's just going to be 6 operas instead of 7. I'll make sure to put a notation in there. Back to the video. Bright Shing's Dream of the Red Chamber. Thomas Addis's The Exterminating Angel. John Adams' Girls of the Golden West. Brett Dean's Hamlet. Nico Moli's Marnie. Mason Bates's The Revolution of Steve Jobs. That's 7 in 2 years. 7 well-received operas that have had significant exposure in the past 6 seasons. Obviously, I don't expect every year to be like that, but I expect composers to keep pushing the medium. I expect to see new art. And even in low output years, I will defend it. Art isn't just an image or song that tells a story. It's a reflection of ourselves. What we see, what we hear, how we see and hear it, where we see and hear it, who we see and hear it from, why we see and hear it that way. This is all reflected in the art that's made. Sometimes it will be hard to see that reflection, but we have to let it out. Holding it in will do nothing but cause harm. And perhaps, if we're lucky enough, and a piece has the staying power, they'll be talking about these operas 170 years from now, the same way we talk about Verdi. Oh, and to answer the questions from the beginning, the highest grossing films of 2004, in order: Shrek 2, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Spider-Man 2, The Incredibles, and The Passion of the Christ. And the Oscar for Best Picture was $1 Million Baby. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.
All with one device does it all. In one hand, all you need. Only one device does it all. In one hand, all you need. Information, education, entertainment, communication, all you